Hey, we're talking about the difference between mechanical and electronic shutters on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Here I am, of course, as always, answering your photography questions. Don't forget to go to AskDavidBergman.com, submit your own photo questions there, and I will pick the best ones to answer right here on a future show. Today's question is from Mike P, and he asks, what's the difference between mechanical and electronic shutter on a mirrorless camera? Is mechanical better for shooting sports due to rolling shutter? All right, a lot of people may not realize that actually in a lot of cameras now, you actually have two different kinds of shutters. You can shoot mechanical or electronic. Let's talk about what they are and what rolling shutter is. Now, let's rewind back to the 35mm film days. All of those SLR cameras had mechanical shutters in them. Basically, there's a shutter that covers the film, and then that shutter opens up, exposing the film. Technically, there are two shutter curtains. One of them opens to expose the film, and then a second one closes up to stop the light from hitting the film, finishing out your exposure. So the amount of time that shutter was open and your film was exposed meant your image was brighter, the longer that was open, right? So that's a traditional mechanical shutter. And a lot of modern, even mirrorless and DSLR certainly have that type of mechanical shutter. Again, with a mirrored camera, with a DSLR, what happens is the mirror actually has to move out of the way first, then the shutter opens, exposing the digital sensor now in a DSLR instead of film. Then the second curtain closes up, and then the mirror has to flip back down so that you can look through it. Now, on a mirrorless camera with a mechanical shutter, there's no mirror. So the way that process works, since the shutter is really sort of always open because you need to be able to see that live view image, there's no mirror there, so the shutter curtain is open. And then when you take a picture, the shutter curtain actually has to close down first, then sort of prepare to take the picture. The shutter opens, the second curtain comes and closes, and then that shutter has to open up again so that you can then go back into live view mode and see what's happening there in front of your camera. So that's the way a mechanical shutter works. Now, let me show you some pictures. A lot of times when you compare a mechanical shutter to an electronic shutter, we talk about things that are moving fast because that's what's going to cause this rolling shutter that we're going to talk about. But I want to show you first what a mechanical shutter looks like. Now, to photograph some fast action, a lot of times we like to use things like airplane rotors or helicopter blades or something like that, something moving really, really fast. Now, instead of going outside and waiting all day for a helicopter to go by, I took out my drone. I have the DJI Mavic Mini, and I took it outside and played around a little bit in the neighborhood, and then hovered it low to the ground and took some pictures with different shutters. So first I'm going to show you here, let's go into the computer. This is with the Canon 1DX Mark III camera. And this is these are pictures of the drone. Now this is at 4,000th or 8,000th of a second. I actually sped up at some point. And you can see these images are what you would expect from a traditional mechanical shutter camera. And yes, there's plenty of motion blur on those blades, but that's to be expected. They're moving really, really fast. So I don't know what the RPMs are on that, but I don't know how fast you'd have to go to be able to freeze them. It would have to be insanely fast. But you can see those blades, they look like normal rotor blades on that drone. They're just a little blurry because they're moving so fast. That's completely normal. So that's the way a mechanical shutter works. Now, let's compare that to an electronic shutter. What is an electronic shutter? Well, a lot of mirrorless cameras use this, and what it is there's no mechanical shutter curtain. There's no physical curtain in front of the digital sensor. All it does, because that sensor is being exposed to light when you're looking through the live view, all it does is it basically electronically activates those pixels and then turns them off, right? I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's basically the way it works. So there's no physical curtain to block the light. It's just turning the pixels on and off. Now, with that, there are some advantages of doing that. Some of the advantages of using an electronic shutter, first of all, there are no moving parts. There's nothing moving. So if you were doing an image like a long shutter, a long exposure image where you really want the camera to be stable, A lot of times if you're shooting with a DSLR, you might lock up the mirror because that mirror flipping will move the camera just a little bit. Well, a lot of people don't realize, but the shutter actually, because it's moving, can affect that as well. So they call that shutter shock, right? Just a little bit of motion when that shutter moves. So that camera shake is prevented completely when you're shooting with an electronic shutter because there's no movement. There are no moving parts. So that's really cool. Also, you can shoot silent, completely silent. Since nothing's moving, and it's just an electronic activation, you could shoot completely silent. That's great if you're a wedding photographer shooting in a quiet, during a quiet ceremony, wedding ceremony, or if you're a photojournalist working in a courtroom or on a film set. That's really, really nice to have that silent mode. And also in some cases, you can shoot even at faster shutter speeds because of that mechanical process isn't happening. There are some electronic shutters that'll let you go as fast as 32,000th of a second, which is really, really cool to have if you need it. Now, there are some disadvantages, and Mike, you brought up the biggest one. We call it rolling shutter. Now, the way the data is taken off of that sensor, it scans those pixels one line at a time. Instead of a mechanical shutter where pretty much the entire frame is exposed at once, it has to pull that data off the sensor one line at a time. So if you have really fast motion, especially something that's moving horizontally, you're really going to have some distortion there. My friend Joseph Flinashki has a great demo where basically you take your arm and if you were photographing this arm moving left to right really fast, let's pretend you're in a moving car and the tree is flying by. As this is moving, right, in relation to the camera is collecting data as it goes down. So if this is moving, as it's gathering that data and pulling that data off, that instead of being a straight line, all of a sudden now that, actually it'd probably be this way, that tree or your arm, my arm in this case, is going to be slanted. It's not going to be straight up. So we call that rolling shutter. That's because of the way that data is pulled off of the sensor. So that is definitely a disadvantage with fast moving motion. Now, the other thing you might have, another disadvantage, is you might have a thing called banding, where a lot of lights actually pulse. They pulse with different color temperatures. We can't see it with the naked eye. Our brain compensates for that, so we don't really see it. We see it as a solid color. But for example, like the sodium vapor lights in an old high school gym or some LED lights actually do pulse different colors. And sometimes you'll see it if you shoot bursts of images where each frame is a different color, which seems odd, right? Of a very, very fast burst of a scene. If you're seeing that, that means that light is actually pulsing. So if you're using an electronic shutter and it's pulling that data off one line at a time, the issue there is you might see streaks of different colors throughout the one frame, and that's not ideal. So let me now go back into the computer here, and I'm going to show you the same drone. I brought it out now. I brought out my EOS R, and I put it on silent mode, which is the electronic shutter. And you remember what it looked like before with the mechanical shutter. With the electronic shutter, ouch, this is what those blades now look like. It's so bizarre looking, right? And the reason is, again, if you think about the way that data is being pulled off, those blades are moving so fast that by the time the next line is captured, is pulled off of that, not captured, but pulled off of that sensor, the blades have moved into a completely different position. So because of that, it's really distorted and just really kind of funky, right? It's kind of a cool artsy thing, but not something I would ever really use. So that is not ideal for something moving that fast, right? So now, Mike, you asked me about shooting sports. From a practical standpoint, it really depends on the sport. If it's just sort of people running or moving, it depends on the camera, but you might not notice it that much. But anything that's moving really fast, the ball, right? Or maybe a tennis racket swinging or a baseball bat, especially down at the end, maybe people's hands as they're jumping or something. If you catch them at the peak of the action, you might not notice it, but their arms or their legs that are still moving, you might actually see some distortion. That is not ideal. I would say, given the choice, I would shoot with a mechanical shutter when I'm doing sports. Now, technology is changing, right? Newer technology is helping to alleviate this problem. All electronic shutters do have rolling shutter because we don't currently have a camera that has what's called a global shutter, where it actually captures the entire sensor in one shot. That doesn't exist right now in early 2020, but new technology like the Canon EOS 1DX Mark III actually has a a brand new processor on it, the DJI X processor, and it is a DSLR, but you can, it's sort of a hybrid where you can shoot live view instead of shooting optically, and that is, you can then choose if you want to shoot electronic or mechanical. And so you kind of have the best of both worlds, because now if you're shooting sports or something, I mean, it's a great sports camera, you want to be shooting mechanical, but even that electronic mode, because that new DJI X processor is so much faster than older processors, it's scanning those lines faster and it's minimizing that rolling shutter effect. So it's not gone completely. Like I said, every electronic shutter has that issue, but with newer cameras, we're seeing it less and less. Banding is minimized and rolling shutter is minimized. So that's only going to get better and better. So Mike, I hope that answers your question. Again, I think given the choice, if you can shoot mechanical shutter for sports action, I think you're going to be better off. But as newer cameras come out, it's going to alleviate that problem quite a bit. So thanks for joining me, everybody. Listen, again, if you have your own photo questions, I hope you go to AskDavidBergman.com. And as always, the great folks at Adorama TV, thanks so much for your support here. And we've got so many other great photo hosts with all kinds of free shows, many, many years of shows, and new ones every week. This show comes out every Monday morning. I believe it's 10 a.m. Eastern. So hope you'll join me. See you back here next week on Ask David Bergman.